It's bug season. Heck, who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just type in Grandeur Pet Solutions, and we are so happy that they're title sponsor for Outdrink the Coverage in 2023.
Hey, I mean, that was a good point.
I think we might start seeing some go back.
Hold on.
Wolverines! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go! Yeah! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go! Yeah! Here we go!
We had a champion decided in college football. We've got the playoffs starting in the NFL. We've got so much to talk about. Oh, yeah, we've got Black Monday and possibly Brown Tuesday. Another coach has been fired, and we're here to talk about it. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett and Nohe. Grandeur Pest Solutions outdrank the coverage right here on L4 Media. But before we do all that, I've got to ask Intern Nohe, how are you doing? What are you drinking?
Well, I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for asking. Tonight, I am drinking Canton Distillery Bourbon in a football decanter. This is from
somebody that gave you that.
Yes, thank you for the Christmas gift, buddy. It's from Cooperstown, New York. And yes, Cooperstown is the Baseball Hall of Fame, and Canton, Ohio is the Football Hall of Fame. Very ironic.
It's kind of all convoluted right there when it comes to that. And it's funny because we didn't even realize all that till I gave it to you. I was going to give it to you. We hung out and we did multiple shows on a Friday for state championships. And then we did a Monday night. I was going to give it to you on Monday night, but I ended up giving it to you on Friday. Yeah. And so we were just sitting there looking at the bottle and you were like, wait a minute, this says Cooperstown. And it's like, wait a minute. So it's baseball. Anyway, it's all mixed up, but it's a pretty good tasting little bourbon too, though.
Yeah, it has honey on the nose and then it has some caramel notes, just typical bourbon. It's pretty good, about 45% alcohol, 90 proof. It's some good sipping whiskey, and I think I've actually tried to mix it into an old fashioned. It turned out pretty solid.
Yeah, I think you did that here, didn't you?
I think so. I think you had everything. I think you had the cherries and all that. So I think I did it there too. But anyway, it's good. What are you drinking, and how are you doing, sir?
Well, it's more of what I drank. I don't have anything to drink. We finished off some of that larceny and stuff that you had. I did some slow drinking during the Cowboy game. So I became a grown man and I poured me 2 shots of diesel.
Oh,
180 proof. That's why I'm kind of feeling weird today. That's what I drank. I'm not drinking any more of it because I'm like, I will say this: if you're like me and you're not real big into like the taste of any liquor, and you're just needing something to like give you just hey, I just want to feel good. Hey, 2 shots, and I'm feeling pretty damn toasty, to be honest with you.
That's basically all you need.
Yeah, it really is. And so, yeah, that's what I drink. I've got me water now, and then
Cheers.
I'm gonna cheers, my friend. And we've got fun things to talk about. Of course, we're going to be talking about the NFL. We're going to be talking about not only the playoffs and the round one, which, by the way, I think they need to rename now. I think it needs to stop being called the wild card round. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. We'll also be talking, of course, the coaching changes. I don't think as many as what people thought, but as shown today, maybe it's just going to be a slower rollout with all that. As again, we'll talk about that. But let's talk about last night. And we saw a championship crowned in college football. The very last 4 playoffs ended with Michigan. It's one of those that so correct me if I'm wrong, but let me see how you feel about this. The score does not indicate how close the game was, but at no time did I ever feel that Washington was about to make a comeback. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree with you. Did you watch the whole game last night?
Yes. Yeah, I watched most of it, and then I went back this morning. I had missed the fourth. I kind of got out on the fourth quarter. I started watching the Stars. They've been struggling, so I kind of wanted to watch them. But I did watch most of I watched from I guess about 4 minutes left in the third to through the fourth. About that, right in that spot where it was 20-13 forever, and Washington just couldn't pee a drop at that from that moment on.
So I watched the whole game, and I 100% agree with you. The game was much closer than the score indicated. Michigan wins 34-13. Uh, it was 2 big runs by Donovan Edwards, the backup running back from Michigan. Really, it's more of they have 2 starting running backs, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. They're going to be excellent pros. I think Donovan Edwards has probably more of an upside. I think Corum, a little undersized, but he's a plotter. Like, he's a slower Kyron Williams for the Rams.
Yeah.
But I really like his game. I like the way he plays. I would say Michigan got up big, 17-3. Washington was kind of struggling, and then on defense, they made a big stop on 4th and 2. And then Washington drove down and scored right before the half to make it 17-10. But to be honest, I mean, the game was close, but Michigan was still in control. You could feel like they were going to win as long as they don't make the mistakes. And what ended up happening was Washington ended up making a mistake. Their offensive line was the best in the country, and they finally met up with a team that could match well along the defensive line. And I would say it was most of the time it was more of an even match between the lines, but Michigan started asserting themselves in the second half, and then that created 2 turnovers by Penix, and that resulted in 10 points, and that was kind of the difference in the game. But Michigan kept the game close only because they couldn't convert on 3rd down. Neither team did a good job converting on 3rd down. I think there was a combined 3 third down conversions in the whole game between both teams.
Well, and that's one thing Washington, did. Everybody looks at the score, and you saw 37-31 against Texas. But one of the things they did really well against Texas, especially in that first 3 quarters as they built the lead, was they played really good 3rd down defense. I think they held Texas to 4 of 11, if I remember correctly, maybe 4 of 12. But, for all the talk about Washington's defense struggling, and they did, and we now see what happens when Washington's offense played a top 10 defense, because that's something Washington hadn't done all year. Yeah. And that's the thing about college football, man. It's great, and it's also crappy. Is you're never going. I mean, well, if my model ever happens, which I think we're getting closer to, you will eventually see everybody almost play everybody. But you're just gonna. You had Washington sitting in the old Pac-12, rested soul, and they were playing teams that were okay defensively, and so you kind of feel like now and. I hate to be the guy that does the one game prove something, but I do think last night makes you now question, okay, what can Michael Penix Jr. do in the pro game? Because this was a good defense, and yeah, he got stepped on, and he was banged up, but I don't think he was as injured as people are saying he was, or making it out like it was. It wasn't like he was having to be carried like leftwich down the field or anything, but he struggled, and he struggled with accuracy, and that was the thing that was shocking to me, was just how bad he was overthrowing and underthrowing his targets last night.
Yeah, credit Michigan's defense. Penix Jr. is one of the most accurate quarterbacks I've seen at the college
Exactly.
level. For me, I don't know what his pro prospects are right now. He's like a mid first round pick, which shocks to me. It's very shocking to me. To me, he's a more accurate, slightly more mobile Jason White. He was for those that are listening, he was a former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback for Oklahoma back in the day, but couldn't make it the NFL because his legs were shot.
Yeah, I do think Penix Jr. has more velocity on his ball. The biggest thing with Jason White was that he just didn't have an arm. Now, you can say, I mean, honestly, Chad Pennington didn't have an arm either, but Chad Pennington got into a system, and also the Jets kind of fell into that. They, that's just how sometimes those type of quarterbacks work. But I do think that his stock has dropped. I don't think Penix Jr. is a first-round pick now.
I never thought he was.
Me neither.
I like this game, but he's a 6-year senior. He's had surgery on both knees, on the shoulder, and then you saw him. The elbow. I don't know. Was it elbow? Not elbow. It was a rib injury, I think.
Yeah.
That late in the game. So the guy's a little injury prone. I mean, he's decent size, very accurate, but when you got pressure on him, I mean, it was he barely got over 50% completion, which was kind of a shock, like you said. He was typically throwing close to 80% throughout the season. So just him throwing, I think it was like 53%.
Now, his wide receivers didn't help him. They had terrible games. Like, it was just one of those things. And it's weird how dropped passes are like errors in baseball.
Yeah.
One guy does it, and all of a sudden you look up and you've had 4, 5, 6 drops. Now, I will say this for Penix, too. Boy, he looks like he would be one of those perfect ones that gets drafted late and gets picked up by a team that's not that bad, has a lot of weapons around him, and they don't need him to be, a 42 touchdown, 10 interception guy. He can be a 28 touchdown, 10 interception guy, and they still be good. So, I mean, maybe a drop in draft might actually help him because I don't think he can go somewhere. Well, like you brought up, a lot of people forget, he's older. I don't think he can go somewhere where you're like, hey, we need you to be our franchise for the next 10 years. But he could go somewhere, say, a Pittsburgh, a team, a Denver, a team that has everything else. And they're like, hey, we don't need you to be the guy for the next 10 to 12 years. Just be the guy for the next 5 to 6 years. And then, let's see what happens. In saying all that, too, I'm starting to see the whole JJ, McCarthy. He's a winner. He should be a first-round pick. I just want to point to the Patriots and Mac Jones. And remember, folks, winning in college does not automatically mean that you should be a first-round draft pick.
JJ McCarthy, he's played 2 seasons at Michigan. He was 27-1 as a starter. Very impressive. He's right now projected as like a top 15 pick, which I mean, he's 6'3", a little over 200 pounds, has a decent arm. I would say Mac Jones might have had a better one, but the thing people say is he didn't really have to shoulder the weight of the Michigan offense. They could just use their elite offensive line, their 2 elite running backs, and they just needed him to convert third downs and make clutch throws when needed. So I don't see how he'd be a first-round pick either. But, yeah, he's a great college quarterback, had a great career.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And someone's going to draft him. I don't think someone's going to draft him in the first round. I don't think any team is that desperate. There's a lot of other good options at quarterback. And there's a lot of good options that are going to be available during the free agency period. So I really don't think he'll be a first round pick. I would be shocked if anyone picked him in the first round or the second round.
I think once and again, a lot of that's just the high of him winning, and people I think some people try to be smart. I'm going to put him in the first round. Yeah. I think when the scouts start to tear down his game, I see him being a 5th, 6th round pick, maybe even undrafted. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think. I mean, only thing I think he really has is his size. I don't think he has a great arm. It feels like his scrambling and rushing isn't. He's not athletic enough to be able to put that into the NFL game. Again, though, he's a guy that if you put him on a team that has a lot of weapons and a defense, and you're just a Pittsburgh. I mean, yeah, I could see him maybe doing that. I mean, except for it's unfortunately for him, Mason Rudolph's winning the MVP next year. So, he's not going to have a chance there. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But, Good quarterback, good college quarterback. So what is your overall view of what the college football season was? What's the thing you'll take away from this?
Changing, well, the end of an era, if I could say it that way, just the end of the 14 playoff, which is better than the BCS, end of Pac 12, essentially, as we know it, the end of the Big Ten as we know it, because it's going to start getting elevated.
Yeah.
For years, the Big Ten was just kind of like a second tier Power Five. There was Ohio State, Michigan, a little bit further down, Penn State, a little bit further down, Iowa, and that was really it in that conference. Now they're getting an influx of real talent in Oregon. I love what Lanning's doing there. I think they're going to get over the hump next season with Dylan Gabriel, the Oklahoma transfer at quarterback. And then Washington coming over and Utah coming over. The Big Ten's going to be pretty stacked. They'll be able to compete with the SEC team for team. But yeah, it's just end of an era. That's where I would boil it down to. SMU moving to the ACC, Colorado moving to the Big 12.
Texas and OU to SEC, all that. I think the things I take away from it is, it reminds me of how little Michigan has won national championships. Them and Texas are both considered blue bloods, rightfully so, but a lot of it for both of them happened before certain things. Texas was still competitive in the 70s, but after the 60s, and I don't count the 70 national championship. They got beat by Notre Dame in the Cotton Bowl. And I know there were two polls back then, the AP and the UP, and the UP actually purposely voted after the regular season and literally crowned what they called the regular season champ. And that's fine, but I don't count that. But Texas was competitive through the 70s and early 80s. And then, from 98, really 99 to, 2009. But Texas hasn't won a lot of national championships, and neither has Michigan, yet they're both blue bloods. I just thought that was kind of funny. And this is to me the mark in the year where we can finally say Texas is back. I think, you make the playoffs, you're back. I think we won't see undefeated teams win championships. I think that's going to be a thing of the past, just because so Texas right now in the way too early polls, a lot of them have them number 2. Well, in a 6-week period, Texas will play Michigan, Oklahoma, and Georgia, with Oklahoma and Georgia being back-to-back. I in no way feel that Texas is going to win 3 of those. I don't even know if they win 2 of those. I still think they're going to be in the playoff, though, because, again, that 12 teams. But, yeah, that's just, I do think the undefeated 15-0, I think it's going to be a really special team going forward that does that.
It'll be an all-time great team for the reason what you just said. The strength of schedule is going to be so amazing coming from the Big Ten and from the SEC. ACC, really not so much until the talent gets there. But, good point. There'll be a lot of – I don't know if you remember, in the BCS college football playoff era that's won 2 games or lost 2 games and won the championship was the 07 LSU Tigers. I could see a lot of teams losing 2 games.
Oh, yeah.
Making the playoffs, getting healthy, getting hot, and going on a run. I could definitely see that going forward. And I would still put them up as one of the best teams of all time. It's just, you have to think about it from the terms of 2024 and forward with this 12-team mega conference structure. I'm excited to see what happens next season. As someone that doesn't have a favorite college football team, I'll be happy to see all these matchups. I'll live for it. I'll be watching more Saturday college football than ever.
Do you think that'll get watered down though as we keep going? 10 years from now, of course in the SEC, but 10 years from now, will Texas, Michigan seem special? And I'm not saying this in a bad way. I'm just saying, when you think about it, like the NFL, Dallas is going to play Philadelphia twice a year. Yeah, the rivalry is great, but you're going to play them. There's no specialness to it. There's a little bit of specialness of, we don't see Cleveland every year. But, you see them, we're going to see them. Dallas is going to see them next year, or this year, technically on the calendar, but next season. And Dallas just played them in 2020. So even that isn't quite as special as it used to be. So that is the one thing. I do worry that the unique matchups will kind of not feel unique anymore.
I agree with that. I also think that we won't really see those changes until 2027, 2028. I think it'll be kind of status quo for the next few years.
I agree.
Uh, and then once teams start figuring out how to recruit in this new environment, uh, who knows? Like going forward, Hugh Freeze might catch on and be innovative at Auburn and start attracting a lot of offensive talent. He's going to be calling plays next season. What if he impresses and he lures team or elite players to come there? How about Deion Sanders? He's starting to recruit again. And what if they turn the table in the Big 12 and make that a power conference? They're going to attract talent there too. So I don't really know what's going to happen in the future. At present, I can pretty much predict that, the Georgias and the Texas and Michigan for the next 2 to 3 seasons are going to dominate. And then who knows, by the end of the decade, it could look completely different.
Well, with Michigan, I don't know, because it does feel like this was the swan song for Jim Harbaugh. That very much felt like just the way the celebration and the things he said. And somebody brought it up so well. It's so crazy how him and Pete Carroll almost their NFL to college back to NFL path. Now, the difference was Harbaugh had a lot of success his first run through the NFL. Pete Carroll didn't. Neither his first 2 runs. New England wasn't as bad, but at the Jets, it was terrible. Goes to college, he rehabs.
That sucks though for him with the Jets. It was one season.
Yeah.
That Marino fake pass or that fake spike touchdown. That was what he's most remembered for with the Jets, and that kind of sucks. The Patriots, I see your point. He inherited a team that made the Super Bowl loaded, and they gradually got worse and worse and worse.
Well, and it's fair or not, he gets the blame for that. But he goes to USC. He rehabilitates his name. He has some NCAA violation issues, and he goes to the pro. Look at what Jim Harbaugh did. He goes down to Michigan. He finally gets them up to national championship. They've had some NCAA, and it's not just the coaching. It's not just the science still in it. He's had other things. It just feels like this is a natural progression for him to now take the next step to, possibly going into the NFL. And we will transition to Black Monday happened yesterday. I'm sorry, African American Monday happened yesterday. Sorry about that. No. Were you surprised that now, again, maybe it's slower this year? Mike Vrabel, it was announced, at first they were people were saying, oh, well, they agreed to part ways, but now it's coming out that now the Titans basically fired him. It sounds like he basically pitched, and I know I'm not knocking him for this, but he basically pitched, hey, I can be the guy that leads this mini teardown. And I think the Titans realize, unfortunately for Tennessee fans, unless they just hit the draft perfectly, Tennessee's going back exactly where they were before Mike Vrabel and back to possibly being a really crappy team for the next couple of years. But anyway, were you surprised that there wasn't more action on Black Monday?
A little bit. I remember 1 or 2 years ago, there was 7 or 8 fired on Monday. So I think I was expecting that a little bit more. I was just I think there are a few coaches that are given one more year. Doug Peterson with the Jaguars, you and I had talked about that. You were thinking they would fire him. I was thinking they would fire their offensive coordinator, Press Taylor, who's Zach Taylor's brother, head coach for the Bengals. But they ended up firing the defensive coordinator, Mike Caldwell. It was a good move. They did create a lot of turnovers, which was kind of their problem the season prior. But in losing 5 or 6 games to close out the season, you could see that defense starting to give up points and lose some pretty winnable games.
No, I totally agree with that. They were 22nd total defense. They were really good against the run. They were terrible against the pass. But let's go ahead and go through the roles of who was fired. We'll go ahead and start all the way with, in season. Of course, Josh McDaniel of the Raiders was fired. Let's see. Frank Reich of Carolina, he was fired in season.
He is the first. Did you know he was the first coach to ever be fired in back-to-back seasons?
Back-to-back season. Isn't that crazy? I still. Look, this isn't on him. Unfortunately for him, it might be harder now to get a job because I think NFL franchises are way more trying, and I'm not trying to be social here and all, but I think they're trying to not use the retread white coach so much anymore, which is unfortunate for him because Frank Reich should not have been fired. Whether Bryce Young is the guy or not, whether this was a roster that's not a great roster that I think needs to be rebuilt more than what people understand. Also, David Tepper sounds like he's Daniel Snyder without being creepy. He's just an asshole. And of course, he got fined for throwing a drink on Jacksonville Jaguar fans as they celebrated. But especially because by all reports, it was basically David Tepper saying, "Hey, we want Young," and everybody else in the organization saying, "Well, now we kind of want Stroud." And that's why I think people have done this whole thing this week about, hey, Lovie Smith actually saved the Texans because they won last year. I don't think Houston was 100% sold on Young being the guy. I don't think I think that's one of those revisionist history now where you look back and it's a fun story. I still think it was 50-50 because it was 50-50 for everybody on whether it was going to be Young or Stroud.
Yeah, even me, I actually going into the draft, I thought Bryce Young was a better pro prospect than CJ Stroud. I think something about me and Ohio State quarterbacks, I don't care for them.
Yeah, everybody. That's everybody's thing because I mean, let's be honest. CJ Stroud, if this arc continues, he's the best Ohio State quarterback in ever. I mean, and that's not a long list of, great names. It's just, hey, dude, you actually have a starting job for 3 years. You're now the best one.
CJ Stroud.
Bobby Hoyer.
Oh, I was going to say Kirk Herbstreit.
No, Bobby Hoyer. Kirk Herbstreit didn't even make an NFL roster. I don't
Yeah. Bobby Hoying was really good, but then Craig Krenzel helped them win a championship.
Craig Krenzel, that's a name I haven't heard. Wow.
I forgot the third string quarterback that won it in 2014 for Ohio State with Zeke as the running back.
Yeah.
Cardale Jones.
Troy Smith. But
Terrell Pryor.
Or Terrell Pryor. Yeah, Terrell Pryor.
And Troy Smith, who won a Heisman in 2006. Yeah.
Terrell Pryor, though, he had an NFL career not as a quarterback. That tells you how great Ohio State quarterbacks are. But yeah, so anyway, so Frank Reich got fired. Brandon Staley got fired. I don't know why. That one's the most just satisfying. I don't tend to. You and I talked about this before. I don't tend to hate anybody in the NFL. I don't tend to I don't want the Eagles to ever be successful, and their fans can go fuck themselves. But outside of that, I don't hate the Eagles. I don't know why, but something about Brandon Staley and we talked about this many times off the air, and maybe it's because you and I kind of always liked the Chargers, but God, he felt like Josh McDaniel on the defensive side.
He was so stubborn to do it his way and not change, even though the product on defense was not there. It looked bad. And in his last game, when they lost to the Raiders 63-21, you saw it full. You let Aiden O'Connell just shred you apart. And it felt really fitting because he just wasted a great roster.
Yeah.
That has not lived up to their expectations. I mean, that could very well be Jim Harbaugh's destination if he so chooses to enter the NFL. Right now, the Chargers their home fans are getting outnumbered by the visiting fans.
I don't know if that ever changes, though. Look, let's be honest. Everybody said this. I'm not saying some big breaking news. Nobody wanted the Chargers in LA. I mean, nobody. And I don't even know if they start winning Super Bowls. Does that really matter? I mean, yeah, you'll get some fans because of that, but I still think I see a world eventually where the Chargers go back to San Diego or go somewhere. Maybe they end up in Oakland. That wouldn't, I could see that.
I really wish they went back to San Diego. I used to love watching some San Diego Charger games.
From Qualcomm.
Qualcomm, Jack Murphy.
Yep.
It was one of my favorite, especially the '94 Chargers team that's kind of more infamous now. I loved watching that team and how Stan Humphries had the broken arm. He had wear that big white cast.
Yep.
And Natron Means and that Super Bowl run they won. It was a lot of good memories watching those San Diego Chargers. So they really don't fit in LA. They look beautiful. I love their uniforms. Like they have what you would think is like, the glamour quarterback and Justin Herbert.
Should be a high-powered offense.
Should be a high-powered offense, but now they're all getting a year older. Keenan Allen is in his early 30s. Mike Williams, I don't know the last time he played a full season. Eckler.
Yard season. Eckler's banged up a lot too. Again, I think we're seeing teams drafting talent purely, and they're not looking at things like injury thing. And you and I talk about, especially in the salary cap era, your biggest talent's your availability first and foremost. If you can't play, I don't care how great you are. If you can't be on the field, I don't care. Let's go ahead and go through the other fire, and we'll get back to the who we think goes where. Atlanta fired Arthur Smith. A little bit surprised by that. I think that outside of San Diego, I think that they have the most ready to win, almost their roster. They need a quarterback. And Arthur Smith kind of feels like maybe he had a little bit of like that Brandon Staley kind of like, we're going to do things my way. I'm not going to listen to change and all that. But I just think they got hamstrung. They just made they tried to roll with Desmond Ridder and it didn't work. And so I think now if you're the Falcons, I think you're going to go offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, and he hire a wonderkin offensive coordinator, and y'all draft a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's the route they're going to go. They had Dan Quinn. They fired him. They went offense. Tennessee offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. Didn't work. 3 straight 7-10 seasons. Getting rid of him. I think they go back to defense. They draft
Dan Quinn again.
I was thinking that right before the podcast, but I'm not really sure that's going to happen. But I know Dan Quinn definitely wants to get back into coaching.
Well, I mean, him and Arthur Blank had a great relationship. Apparently, that was one of those things when Blank in the front office fired him. It was one of those that was really hard for them. They didn't, it wasn't easy. Quinn has spoke very glowingly of Arthur Blank and the Atlanta franchise. It's familiar, but you're also completely starting over. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that's from that era that's on the team. I don't know, man. That seems like one of those try it again and let's see what happens. I still think there's a part of Dan Quinn that stays a defensive coordinator, though.
I like what they've done free agent wise on defense. I like Jesse Bates III. Like if Dan Quinn went back to Atlanta to even be a defensive coordinator, he's going to inherit a great roster. Now Calais Campbell's probably not going to play next season. He's getting up there in age. But everything else looks good. They need more pass rush help. But on offense, though, they're young. They're very talented. They got a pretty solid offensive line. They got Bijan at running back. They got Pitts at tight end. They got Drake London, who's starting to feel himself a wide receiver. Just add more depth and draft a quarterback or get one that's really good in free agency. There'll be some available, like Kirk Cousins. There'll be players available. And they need to go ahead and address the quarterback issue, hire they already have a GM, but have them find the actual coach they want and talk to that coach about 3 to 5 years down the line. How do you see this roster looking? You have a young nucleus. You have a really good kicker too, which is always important.
That's actually a very good point. I mean, again, that's why I say outside of the Chargers, I think the Chargers and the Falcons, as far as win immediately rosters, are where you might see the Dan Quinn, somebody that's had a chance before and they just need another chance type of thing, and to see where they go with that. I know he won't get it, but man, Frank Reich in LA with the Chargers, I think would be a great, but the Chargers won't do that. You're not going to give a dude that's been fired back-to-back year. He might get a third chance, but he's going to have to go back to the offensive coordinator level. In fact, I heard a really good one of Frank Reich to Buffalo as offensive coordinator, or Frank Reich to Pittsburgh as offensive coordinator. And both of those track, because he would have ready-made teams to just install his plan, and he's not having to completely get a rebuild type thing.
It would be nice. I still think Frank Reich's a really good offensive mind. My only concern with Buffalo and Pittsburgh is they kind of figured it out with the replace. Like Buffalo, they fired Ken Dorsey. They replaced him with Joe Brady, who was famous for the 2019 LSU Tigers and what he did with Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and all them.
I mean, have they? I mean,
Yeah, they become more balanced on the offense. They've been well. I know that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs still are off, but they're running the ball. They're more balanced. Their offensive line is dominating, and they're healthy, and they haven't lost. You know, they were 6-6. Now they're 11-6, number 2 seed in the AFC, in good position, and they're playing more well balanced and letting Josh Allen be a little creative when he needs to be. I think they let Joe Brady be the full-time offensive coordinator next season. And I think in Pittsburgh, maybe in Pittsburgh, but they're finally starting to get their identity down. They are always going to be a running team.
Yeah.
They're finally starting to run the ball. They're going deep with Mason Rudolph, which has been helping. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. Playing a good team like Buffalo, who could probably negate the deep bomb consistently.
I think Buffalo, and we'll get into the picks, but I think Buffalo Pittsburgh is going to probably be the ugliest game. I see Buffalo winning without it, especially with TJ Watt not available. But you make a good point about the two staffs. Also, Ron Rivera was fired. Not surprising. I mean, I think it would have taken Ron Rivera making the playoffs to keep his job, simply because if I'm buying a new team, I want my imprint on the team pretty quick. And that's what the owner, was it Josh Harris? I think is his name. That's what Josh Harris wants. He wants to, put his own imprint on the team. They need to make a splash. I was trying to think. The one thing not a knock, but I mean, there's nobody that's really a splash hire. I mean, maybe Mike Vrabel, but I mean, why would Mike Vrabel go to Washington, which is in the exact situation that Tennessee in, where you're having to tear down? I think if Vrabel coaches this year, it'll be at one of those ready-made to win in Atlanta, something like that. And I knock Vrabel, and I think he got overrated, but I don't think he's a terrible coach. I just think he got really overrated. I think that 1 year run to the title game got people, thinking he was, he's the one he's the Bill Belichick disciple that's going to work out. And then they just, I don't know. I just saw all that talent offensively, and yet they continue just to play. Let's run the ball 40 times and only throw it 20 times. And that's great, but this isn't 1995. You just can't do that right now. You've got to be able to throw the ball downfield, and then trading A.J. Brown. And I know that's not on him, or maybe it was on him. I don't know. I think that's the one you look back 10 years from now and go, that's one of the stupidest trades that ever happened.
That started their downfall.
Yep.
From 2018 to the first half of 2022, they were a winning football team. 2 division titles, playoff appearances, playoff success, playoff failures. And then 2022, they had too many injuries, and they didn't have a star wide receiver. They drafted one, hoping they'll be a star in Traylon Burks, but he's not ready yet. And then
I don't think he'll ever be ready.
Probably not. They started 7-3, finished 7-10, and then that losing way carried over into this season, and he just couldn't overcome it. I mean, he had such good success to start. He looked like a genius in that 2019 wildcard round against the Patriots. That was Brady's last game with the Patriots. I believe Tennessee won like 21-13 or something like that.
Yeah, pick six sealed it at the very end. And I also think now you look back, and sometimes you have to step back, and it takes a couple of years. You just realize that, well, that was because the Patriots just, the wheels had started coming off like 3 weeks before then. The A.J. Brown, Traylon Burks, remember those trades when everybody's always like, oh, well, somebody's about to get a big deal. Let's just get rid of him and draft somebody, and let's keep the 5-year rookie win. That's why it's hard to do that, because you've got to hit not only on the first pick with A.J. Brown, but then you got to try and hit on the second pick when you draft the Traylon Burks, and it just doesn't always work. Now, that doesn't mean you re-sign everybody, but you've got to be able to notice the guys that are special, like not just good, but they're special. They're going to be Hall of Fame-esque type players, and they didn't notice that, and they're like, oh, we'll just get Traylon Burks. And nothing against Traylon Burks, but he's just not, he's not been. I don't even think he's gotten 700 yards receiving yet so far in his career. But anyway, let's see. Offense or coordinators that were fired. Of course, we talked about some of them earlier in the year, but Wink Martindale resigns. Of course, a few weeks ago in that Dallas game, they infamously were arguing. You could see him and Brian Daboll arguing. How do you say his name? Arguing. And then apparently they had a really big argument, like on the flight home. They both denied it. But when your defensive coordinator literally is resigning hours after the season ends, then that must have all been true. They had a falling out. And Wink feels like he's one of those that's kind of like a Buddy Ryan type, that he wants to run his defense and he doesn't want you, if you're not part of his inner circle coaching crew, he wants you to just stay on your side of the facilities and let him run the defense.
Which it'll work in certain situations. You go to a team that has a head coach that's more offensive minded, or like a Mike Tomlin where he's more hands off. Just let his coordinators take care of it.
Yeah.
Wink Martindale thrive in that. I mean, they led the league in takeaways, if I'm not mistaken, or at least they led the league in plus minus. So his defense is still effective.
His problem with his defense is, and this is with any blitz heavy defense, is you have got to have really smart football players in your scheme. You've got to have secondary guys. You've got to have above average corners because you're leaving them on islands all game long. You got to have above average, certain coaches, some coaches can come in and I always talk about, Zimmer, Mike Zimmer, he could take crap and he would, we always call it smoke and mirrors. He could take crap and make it look good. Others like Wink Martindale, he needs good players. His scheme is so dependent on having really good players. That's why I always think people like him and Buddy Ryan and the Ryan sons, I don't want to say they're overrated, but they're a little overrated because they need top-notch talent for their schemes to work.
Yeah, I mean, and then conversely, I would say Zimmer was underrated.
Yeah.
He was such a talented coordinator. I wish the Cowboys had eventually found a way to make him the head coach. It just never happened. I don't think he's going to retire. I think Martindale is maybe 60 years old, but I think he has still have some time left, and I think he's going to probably wait for a good opportunity he might even take the year off or go to college. I don't know. I have no idea what his plans are, but I know he's just fed up with what's going on in New York. That might put Brian Dable in some bad territory next season if things start off bad. Yeah.
I think the only reason he wasn't fired this year was the Giants didn't want to have a repeat of what happened with the two guys before him. 2015, they make the playoffs. When did 2015? 2016?
2016. Yeah.
2016, they make the playoffs. Everybody's like, oh my God, the Giants are back. Look at that seamless transition. And then they crash, and then they immediately fire their head coach, which I never understood. Like, wait, the guy just last year with a roster that was kind of crappy, kind of smoke and mirrored his way to a playoff, and now you're firing him. I don't think they wanted to do that because they then fired Fulmer after 1 year. So if you'd have fired DeBall after this one, you'd have literally fired 3 coaches in 5 years, with one of them being fired after year 1. It seems like we see more coaches being fired after year 1 in the NFL now.
Starting to turn into the NHL.
Oh, the NHL's worse. Man, NHL coach of the year. I always love it when I hear, so-and-so won coach of the year. I always say in my head, oh, he's getting fired next year. Hockey is like the worst. Hockey and soccer, man, you can be like champions last year, start out slow for 10 games. You're out. We're going to find somebody else. But yeah, so that's Black Monday. Of course, as the show goes along each week through the playoffs, as coaches are being hired, we'll talk about it. I think most will be basically hired after the Super Bowl or after teams are getting eliminated. Front office stuff. Apparently, Will McClay, the Cowboys' number 3 guy, basically the guy that runs the draft. We're in that annual. Teams are, looking for him. I could see Dallas doing a thing where Jerry changes his title to president and maybe give Will McClay GM, something like that. Because at some point, I can see Will going, okay, I at least want to go somewhere else where it fully is me and I'm in the forefront. And I don't think Dallas is ready to let that happen yet.
Now, among football purists or people who love football, they know who Will McClay is. They know him and Stephen Jones are kind of responsible for some of the really good draft picks that the Cowboys have had since 2010. But yeah, it would be nice just to give him the title of GM. I don't see that as being too hard for Jerry. If Jerry Jones can induct Jimmy Johnson into the Cowboys Ring of Honor, he can give McClay a GM title. Come on.
Well, I told you this as soon as it was announced when they did, and I thought that was really cool what they did in Carolina, and they kind of surprised Jimmy Johnson with it. I remember I messaged you and like, we're going to hear in 6 months that Jerry's got cancer or something.
Yeah.
He or either that or the devil was like, look, you signed this with me back in 1989, and I've given you everything, but you got to do one thing for me. But no, you're right, and I think that's something, and that goes back to Dan Quinn. I still think Dan Quinn will only leave if the situation is right. I don't think he feels like he has to be a head coach somewhere, because for all the talks, and this is why you and I talk about that now. Okay, let's go ahead and transition out of the playoffs. Let's start with Dallas. So I am firmly in the belief that Dallas, and I mean Dallas, the front office, Jerry Jones, Will McClay, Stephen Jones, I think they absolutely love Mike McCarthy. I think they like everything about him as a man, and I think they like pretty much everything about him as a coach. I went into this season feeling that if they got beat in the second round, he's probably fired. I don't feel that way now, but them getting the second seed to me maybe has put more pressure on him, because I'll say this. 2024, Noe, this is the easiest path for the Dallas Cowboys to get to the Super Bowl that they've had since 95. Not that 95 was easy, but that's my point. You saw in other years, even 07, and I know they got beat by the Giants, but even in 07, if they'd have beat the Giants, it wasn't like it was a walkthrough to the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying this year's a walkthrough, because you got the Niners in the NFC title game if they get through. But, man, this feels like, I'll put it this way. If Dallas doesn't at least get to the NFC title game this year, this is going to hurt. As a Cowboy fan, I've always been able to defend and understand, well, hey, look, hey, back-to-back playoffs. We haven't done that since the 90s, so this is a building block. Now, you got to at least get to the NFC title game. And if they end up getting beat by the Packers or getting beat by the Eagles at home in round 2, I don't know if Mike McCarthy's – I think he's safe, but I definitely can see an older Jerry Jones, all jokes aside. He's literally – he's getting up there. He's already up there. Hell, he's lapping being up there. I think they really want to keep Mike McCarthy, but Dallas has got to win.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. I will say this. The good side of Mike McCarthy is this is year 4. They've improved every year. They've won 2 division titles. They've won 12 games 3 years in a row. It hasn't been this good in Dallas since 1993-5.
Yeah.
So 30. He's the best coach we've had in 30 years, performance-wise. Having said that, like you said, they are the number 2 seed. That guarantees them 2 home playoff games, assuming they win the wild card round against the number 7 seed Green Bay Packers. And in a 3-year history of the 17-game season, no number 2 team has lost yet. Dallas hasn't lost at home in 2 years. It's set up for the Cowboys to win at least the wild card game.
I think even the division game.
Sure. There's a lot of flaws to the Buccaneers, to the Eagles, to the Lions. Those were the potential divisional round opponents the Cowboys would play in the division round. I don't really know. Objectively, Cowboys usually destroy inferior teams the last 3 years, and they struggle against just halfway decent teams. It worries me.
Do they really? Okay, so sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but you bring up something, and I'm glad you said that, because I actually wanted to put it in the notes, and I forgot to tell you to. That gets said a lot. Oh, they struggle. They struggle against Seattle. They struggle against Detroit. Did they struggle, or did they just play a good team? And then when you play a good team, good teams will do good things against you, and you just need to do one more good thing. But because Dallas blows the doors off the bad teams, it makes what should be a 50-50 game. Oh, Dallas is struggling. Well, are they? I think that's gotten really overrated.
I think you see teams like Baltimore and San Francisco play good teams, and they win by a couple of scores, especially with Baltimore.
But those 2 teams then play bad teams, and they don't win by a couple scores. So why that's my point. It balances out.
It's just the way Baltimore went to San Francisco, took care of business. What they did to Seattle in Baltimore, what they did to Detroit in Baltimore, what they did to Miami in Baltimore.
But then the Rams go into Baltimore and beat them.
But we've seen the Rams not lose any other game.
But the Rams are a average team to above average. I mean, that's my point.
Some people say that they're borderline elite now.
No.
Their young talent is just coming along right now.
I think, look, and I even told you this in text today because we always start talking show. I'm the guy in week 3 said the Rams are way better than what people think. Yep. If the Rams stay healthy, they're going to make the playoffs. And I'm fully right on that. But we've reached an era because of shows like this, because of media, and because anybody can have a podcast. People want to try to have these home run picks so that they can stand out. And so the Rams have become that. Mainly because they're playing a Detroit team that I think people are like me are going, can you really trust Detroit? Detroit feels like one of those teams that's going to, they're going to front run for most of the year. But then when it gets to the playoffs, and I think the Rams will beat the Lions possibly. But I think people are starting to overrate what the Rams are this year. Now, I think the Rams foundation is a lot better than we all realize, except for they're going to have to find a quarterback. I don't know how much longer Stafford can last. But yeah, I think people have started overrating the Rams a little bit too much now. It's a great end for them, but I mean, they beat a Ravens team, but they also beat a San Francisco team last week that was sitting everybody out. Other than that, and they also got swept by the Seahawks. Or did the Seahawks sweep? Or did they sweep the Seahawks? I can't remember.
The Rams swept the Seahawks.
Yeah, the Rams swept the Seahawks. Sorry, but yeah, I just feel like people are trying. So it's the same thing with the Browns. Oh, the Browns! Everybody say, "Oh, the Browns are going to go to the Super Bowl." I don't even think the Browns. Let's go ahead and talk about it now. Wild card round Saturday. First off, they got to change the name. You've got too many division teams now in this round. Let's call it something else. Really, I mean, just call it round 1. First of all, I know you got to have a cute name for it. But wild card round Saturday, AFC, Cleveland, the 5 seed versus Houston, the 4 seed. This game is at 3:30 p.m. It kicks off playoff football. A couple weeks ago, the Browns beat the Texans 36-22. Most famously, then of course CJ Stroud didn't play the game. Most famously, Amari Cooper went off 265 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think the Browns have been vastly overrated now because of how fun this story is, and I love it. You and I always love this kind of stuff when you get the old veteran crusty quarterback comes off the couch. But this is a turnover machine team. And in the playoffs, turnovers matter. And I think Houston wins this game.
Well, I mean, it is a fun story with the Browns. They have the top-ranked defense. That's not really the fun part. The fun part is former Raven quarterback Joe Flacco comes to Cleveland, a team that's booed him his whole career.
Yeah,
and now they call him Joe Cool, and they're chanting Flacco, and they love him. And just having him there, and he is such a great playoff quarterback because he's the same guy in the playoffs as he's in the regular season, but it makes him elite in the playoffs. So he's going to be a tough out because he's going to stand in that pocket, make a quick decision. And Houston, Houston's young. They're very talented. I still think they're a year away. I think they far exceeded expectations this year by getting the 4 seed, getting 10 wins, rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, stud rookie linebacker. They're a couple years away. I think Cleveland takes this one, but I think they do create some turnovers on the defensive side. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring affair like it was a few weeks ago.
I do. I think this is a in fact, I think I meant to bring my notes in. I think I have it 35-31 Houston.
Okay, so you go with Houston in this matchup. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and go with Cleveland in this matchup. I think it'll be somewhere in the lines of 24-21. It'll still be a close game. I think Houston's going to be pretty game, and I want them to do well. I love the makeup of this team. I like their future. I love their secondary. Will Anderson Jr. is
and by the way, Stingley didn't play in that game.
They need to have one game where all 4 of their secondary players are healthy. That is the best secondary if they're all healthy.
Well, and that's my point. That's why I think that I do think both teams are going to throw. I think that Will Anderson and that front will get some pressure. Joe Flacco cannot move around.
Sure. But he makes quick decisions.
He makes quick decisions, but again, if you have a secondary that's being able to play up on your guys, you can't make those quick decisions. He's thrown a lot of interceptions in his short time. That defense has bailed them out, and that's perfectly fine. That defense is good enough to bail them out. I just think that this is one of those classic games where everybody is on Cleveland. Like, I haven't seen hardly anybody pick Houston.
Right.
And it's at home. I mean, this is in Houston. I just feel like Joe Flacco is due for one of those games to remind you that he's a 39-year-old quarterback coming off the bench. Now, my question is to you before we move on, is Joe Flacco in the league next year?
Yes. I think this might have motivated him to continue playing. I don't think it's going to be the Cleveland, but I think
he'll be a starter or nothing. He won't back up anybody.
It'll be a 1 or 2 year starting role to help, like with Carolina. Like someone they have a young guy there. It's not going to be Carolina. They're going to.
I know what you mean.
Maybe somewhere where they have a player in mind for the long term, but they need someone in an interim because they have enough talent, like an Atlanta Falcon team.
Yeah, I was about to say, but they have to be a playoff contender. I don't think Flacco's going to go to a team where they're 5-12. If he's going to play, he's proven that he's still able to play, and I don't see him being like, Ryan Fitzpatrick talks about it. He was just trying to still hang on. Yes, he made good money, but he was still trying to hang on. Joe Flacco didn't have to hang on. Joe Flacco made $125 million in his career. He can cherry pick, and man, I know he doesn't do a lot of what this coach wants to do, and I know he went to Denver and struggled his first time through. But Joe Flacco and Sean Payton, that's a good one. Or Atlanta. Atlanta's a real good one because you got a run game that protects him. I mean, they look offensively, they kind of look a lot like Cleveland. A couple of really good wide receivers, a really good tight end that's underrated. David Njoku, you could basically joke that he had been the Kyle Pitts of the NFL before Kyle Pitts because, they drafted him early. They signed him to a big deal a couple years ago, and he continued to underperform until this year with Joe Flacco, and all of a sudden, David Njoku looks like freaking Jay Novacek out there. Man, I kind of now want Flacco to Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that'd be the best option, considering the fact that Atlanta, a lot of their losses were against bad teams.
Yeah,
that team, I thought they were going to win the division easy just because of all the free agents they got and all the upgrades they did. The only question was quarterback, but I assumed Desmond Ridder would have been a mistake-free game manager. He ended up being a mistake-prone, also still a game manager.
Man.
So if they address the quarterback situation, then it'll be fine. They'll be a double-digit win team next season. They just need to get the right division. Yeah, just get Joe Flacco in there for a year or two, and then have a quarterback in waiting for the future, and they're set. Atlanta is almost as an attractive option as the Chargers right now.
I'm sorry. Let's take a step back. That's what I love about doing podcasts. We can take as long as we want on these shows. That is the first. I forgot to do that part of the firings. The most attractive job. I know people will say the Chargers because of Justin Herbert and a defense that's young and I think just needs some tweaking. But I think Atlanta, because of where they're at in the NFL, is the most attractive job right now of all the jobs. I just get a quarterback. Just be an average head coach, and I think Atlanta goes 12-5 next year.
Yeah. Again, going back to what I was saying, Arthur Smith, if he had not just gotten blown out the last 2 games, might have still had a job.
Yeah.
But they got just destroyed by the Bears. They got destroyed in their season finale.
2 games that they were very much still in the playoff hunt.
Yeah.
I mean, they shouldn't have. I mean, if they win those 2, depending on tiebreakers, blah, blah, blah. I just think Arthur Smith also, he just doesn't look like he's a likable guy. And that kind of stuff matters when you're about to get fired or not fired. Do the people in the front office enjoy being around you? Do they want to roll up their sleeves with you for the next 10 months at, 14 to 16 hour days? And he just never looked like that type of guy.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I think he was just, he did so well at Tennessee, kind of getting them to be really good at pseudo college style where they're running a lot, but also doing play action and zones and all that. And I think he'll be okay in the NFL. I think he probably has to go back to being a coordinator somewhere.
Oh yeah, and he's a perfectly fine offensive coordinator.
And I think that'll eventually get him back into a head coaching position. This will just be his first failure.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If he's a good head coach or just a smart person, to me, failure is where I learn the most. I do better if I
That's
fail.
why you're so smart.
Yes, I fail a lot. And I think Arthur Smith should use the. I wouldn't even consider it a failure. If I were him, I would consider it a learning opportunity. He got 3 years to learn in Atlanta,
and with a team that they had to rebuild, complete rebuild, got rid of the quarterback, got rid of everything from that 2012 to 2016, 2017 era, and I think that. I think he's one of those guys that people will forget about as far as what Atlanta, but those in Atlanta are going to go, I guarantee if they make the playoffs next year and if they win a Super Bowl in the next 3 or 4 years, you will hear people in Atlanta say, hey, let's not forget Arthur Smith got us to a certain point. And so I actually agree with you there. I think the least desirable, I think Carolina and the Raiders.
Carolina, I like their defensive coordinator. I like what they've done on defense.
Are they going to keep him?
They need to pay Ejiro top assistant.
Yeah, but you're gonna again. This is the Jerry Jones thing. You're gonna hire a coach and then tell him he's got to take that defensive coordinator? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Now that doesn't. Now whoever they hire, he might understand. He might be friends with him. He might know him. He might be 1,000% okay with it. I'm just saying, optics. It never feels like it works.
Yeah, because you want top down. There's a chain of command: owner, general manager, head coach. Head coach has an idea of who he wants as his assistants.
Exactly.
The GM should be talking to the head coach. Head coach should be talking to the GM. That should be a great relationship there. And it's like a great marriage.
Yeah.
It starts at the spouses. You can't say husband and wife because now we're very back.
I'm the Frank Reich of marriages. I'm about to try my third one here. Let's see if this one works. God damn it! Don't fire me back-to-back years. That sucked. Now at least I'll wait 7 years. I went back down to JUCO and started over.
Sorry, buddy. No, but yeah, the head coach and GM it's like a marriage. If they're on the same page, everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, no, I agree.
A good football adage: you do the little things right, everything else will take care of itself.
Big things don't happen until you do the little things. That's what we were always told when I was in high school football. I think the Raiders are a very unattractive position. You've got a Jerry Jones style owner in Mark Davis. You don't have a really good roster. I mean, that's the thing. The Raiders are not. I mean, they're built to be 9-8. And that means you can't slip up. I mean, you're on a razor thin margin. You're in a division that I know the Chargers also have lost their head coach. I know Denver's feeling weird, but it still feels like when all things said and done next year, the AFC West is still going to be a real big, tough, grinded out division. I think if Mark Davis is safe, if Mark Davis is smart, you just go with Antonio Pierce. And he's there for the rebuild, and maybe he sees you all the way through it. If nothing else, he gives you some goodwill for that. But anyway, let's go back to the games. AFC. So you have Cleveland, I have Houston. The other game on Saturday is the AFC Miami at Kansas City. Of course, that game in Germany this year, Chiefs won 21-14. This feels like at the beginning of the year, this was going to be a title game. Now it's a first round game.
Yeah, both teams have disappointed. It's weird because they both had good seasons. Dolphins had a great season until it wasn't.
Yeah. For them, and I know they haven't beat anybody, winning team, blah, blah, blah. But for them, it sucks because it feels like with the defense just completely, being hurt, that any other team they played in the first round, I think they could win. I just think the Chiefs, oddly enough, because of the Chiefs' run game and defense, that just blows my mind to say that.
It's back to the 90s.
Yeah, it's back to the 90s. All we need now is Schottenheimer disappearing in the first round of the playoffs. But I like the Chiefs in this game. I think it's higher scoring than what people think. I think this might be one of their higher scoring games. This might resemble more Buffalo, Kansas City of a few years ago. I think it's going to be a fun game, but it's supposed to be -5, possible snow. And I just feel like this is a Kansas City win.
It's a Kansas City win, and to me, it's more to do with Miami's injuries on the defensive side. They're losing. They have almost no edge rushers. They just signed Justin Houston and Bruce Irvin to contract this year just because they had no more linebackers.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, Jerome Baker's not going to play. Van Ginkel's not going to play. Bradley Chubb's out for the season. So they're missing a lot of good talent, and I really think they're going to be at a handicap on defense. Now, their strength is their offense, but Kansas City has the number 2 defense in football.
Yeah.
They do what we were just talking about, run the ball and play good defense. This should be a pretty by-the-book win for them, like more of a what's it called? Just get through this week, win 21-9, and go into the next round. I think it'll be more lowest scoring. I'm going to say 21-9 Chiefs. Butker maybe gets all 7 field goals in this game and gets all 21 points for the Chiefs.
It's odd you and I are so different, not on our picks. It's the playoffs. Most picks should be 50-50, but like I see more offense in this first Saturday of football, because tendencies is when you have an offensive year in the regular season, your playoffs tend to be more defensive. And when you have a defensive all through the year, especially, let's also remember all these 2 matchups, these 2 teams, 4 teams all played each other.
Yeah.
And I always believe you're going to get more points scored when you've seen a defense. And especially, I just think Miami's defense is just so beat up.
I know what you want it to be a rematch of the 71 divisional round. That's what you want.
5 quarters, 6 quarters, almost.
Is this still the longest game ever played?
Yep, that's still the longest game ever played. And they have a great playoff history. I think the thing everybody forgets about is just it's been a long time since the Dolphins have just been a consistent playoff team. We talk about all these teams, and when you think of the NFL, you think of the Dolphins as one of the ones, and I mean they're still laying this new foundation of being a team that is really good. And you're going to have these growing pains. You're going to have these years where you just have injuries and stuff. The last time these 2 teams played was 1994. That's when the Dolphins beat the Chiefs 27-17. Most notably, that was Joe Montana's last game as a quarterback. All right, let's move over to Sunday. We've got AFC first, Pittsburgh versus Buffalo. Of course, Steelers, everybody, even us on the show 7 weeks ago, we're talking about how, oh no, Pittsburgh might finally have that first losing season under Mike Tomlin, blah, blah, blah. Mason Rudolph said, hey, Monica's, I got this. You remember that thing? You got it. And Mason Rudolph the last 2 weeks is just, I mean, it's been fun. He's almost as fun as Joe Flacco as far as what he's done. But yeah, they win. They get the 7 seed. And then, of course, Buffalo, again, another team that everybody had called dead 7-8 weeks ago. They haven't lost since then. What are your thoughts on this one?
It's like you said, it's a matchup of 2 teams that fired their offensive coordinators, kind of righted the ship. Yeah. They righted their ship late in the season. I think this game might be closer than what some people might think a 2 versus 7 matchup is going to be. I think this might be the high scoring game, shockingly enough.
Really?
I think this might be a 35-31 game, and I think this one will go to – at some point, I got to root for this team. So I'm going to go ahead and say the Bills. I think they'll get a close win in Orchard Park.
I would agree with you if TJ Watt was playing. TJ Watt not playing, I don't think it's close. I think you're going to see the Bills. By the way, Saturday's supposed to be 20 or Sunday's supposed to be 25 degrees and snowing. Now, we all thought last year, hey, it's snowing in Buffalo. Boy, Cincinnati is in trouble. But I feel without TJ Watt, Pittsburgh's defense is very average. I mean, as great as he was, the defense has basically been very average all year anyway. This just feels like Buffalo gets out early and ends up winning. And I just don't know if Mason Rudolph can replicated. The Bills legitimately have a really underrated good defense. That gets lost in all this.
And that's without Tre'Davious White, and that's without Matt Milano.
But they've been without them for 7-8 weeks now, so they have adjusted. Pittsburgh's being without TJ Watt. This is first game, and so I mean, it's like taking Micah Parsons off the Cowboys. That completely changes that defense. So I kind of feel like James Cook will run for 150 yards, and Allen will play mostly mistake free, and they'll kind of grind down. This to me feels like this might be the ugliest game of the week.
It could very well be. I'm going to go ahead and just, I mean, even I like your argument for an ugly game, Bills going away, but I'm going to go ahead and just stick with my guts.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
I still think Buffalo's going to win, but I think it's going to be a high scoring, close game.
All right. We'll skip the 3:00 game and go back to it. We'll finish with that one. To me, the most intriguing game, not only because of the teams, but of course, Matt Stafford versus Jared Goff. NFC 6 seed Rams at the 3 seed Lions, 7 p.m. on Sunday night. The Rams, it looked like Dallas was going to be playing the Rams probably, and then the Rams beat San Francisco because San Francisco played all their backups. The Lions beat Minnesota 2 weeks ago. That secured the North for them. Oddly enough, these two teams have not played since the 50s, so I don't know how much playoff history matters. Detroit won that game 31-21. By the way, it's odd. This is the first time since forever that Cleveland and the Lions are in the playoffs together. That's crazy to think. I think it's like since the 40s or something like that. One of the guys in Sports Rehab had that on our page, and I can't remember what year it was. But anyway, this is
94. I thought the Lions made the playoffs.
But I think the Browns did.
No, they did. That was their one good Belichick year.
Well, I don't know what. Maybe it was they were hosting. I just know that there was some kind of stat that playoff wise, the teams. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So 94, the Lions didn't make the playoffs. They were 9-7. They lost to the Packers in the wild card, 12-16.
But that's the not Sterling Sharp game. That was the.
That was his last year. He didn't play in that game because he got hurt against. I think Tampa to close out the season.
The 90s. One of those years was the Sterling Sharp. I can't remember.
93, because that was the last year the Lions won the division. They ended up hosting the Packers, and that was the big Brett Favre to Sterling Sharp touchdown.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm seeing in my head is that right there.
So the very next year they played again, but roles were reversed. Green Bay hosted.
But anyway.
So you can go ahead and correct them and tell them that I told you without even thinking about it.
I think it was something about them. I think both of them hosting or not hosting because Cleveland hosted. I can't remember what it was. There was something about it. And it was correct. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't like the NFL Hall of Fame and not listening to you on that kind of stuff.
Amen. Thank you.
To me, this is the biggest 50-50 game of the week. And I know people are kind of starting to say that about Philadelphia, Tampa, but I want to remind everybody, literally Tampa's scored 7 points basically in back-to-back weeks. I still think that's going to, as great as the Baker Mayfield story is, their offense has been trash, and I think the Eagles will win that game. But this one truly does feel like a toss-up.
Yeah, to me it's a toss-up because it's so dependent on how much pressure the Rams can get on Goff.
Yep.
Goff has his good days and Goff has his bad days. On his good days, he's not pressured, time to throw. In this game, I'm not sure how healthy Sam Laporta is going to be.
Oh, I think he's basically out, isn't he? I mean, that looked like that looked like a torn ligament type injury.
I know they said he was going to miss some time, but there was no specifics. So he let's just assume he's not going to play. They still have a lot of talent on offense, but they're so dependent on him not getting pressured on. They have the talent to help. They have 2 really good running backs. They have 2 starting running backs. They have 2 or 3 really good receivers. They really don't use Jameson Williams as much as they should, but I think now that he's had some games in him, has some snaps in him.
Drop issues too, though.
Well, yeah. Well, last year he was hurt from the college football playoffs, and then this year he was suspended for gambling. So he hasn't really played a full season yet, and now I think he's starting to round into football shape. He's starting to get used more.
I agree.
But yeah, you're right about the drops. That's the issue. But he's a home run threat, and they need to use him in the playoffs.
So who do you have winning?
I really like the momentum is so key in the playoffs. the Rams have the pedigree. They have a Super Bowl winning head coach.
I think that right there. They have a Super Bowl winning head coach. They have a Super Bowl winning quarterback. They have your big stud defensive guy is still there and playing well. I know Aaron Donald, people have kind of forgot about him as far as like defensive player of the year, but you go look at the tape this year and he's not far off from where he was, the last 5 years. I do think all that matters. And I can see, to me, I feel like either the Rams win going away or the Lions win. If the Lions can withhold that first quarter nerves, energy, adrenaline, and all that, I think the Lions are a better team. But if you allow the Rams to get up on you 14-3, I don't know if you can come back from that.
Coaching is going to be the biggest factor. I think Dan Campbell gambles a little too much.
I do too.
I think, but that's part of the learning process about being a head coach. Grant, they've improved every year he's been there. He's done a great job there, but his gambling has cost them some games too.
Well, I have a coach friend that told me he believed that Dan Campbell for the Lions is not the long-term guy. He's the set them up for the next guy type of coach. And part of it he believes is and this is a guy, I mean, he's only a high school coach. He's been very successful. He's won state championships. He just feels that he's seeing Campbell getting desperate. And that whole aggressive thing is because he realizes he's hiding flaws through that aggressiveness. And when you play good teams, that's going to catch up to you. And he's just like, I can see them doing this for 2 or 3 years and just kind of topping out, and then you get somebody else to come in. So we'll see as far as Dan Campbell. But I agree that he's way too aggressive now.
Yeah, and I think that'll be the difference. My pick is the Rams. They're going to win by 2 touchdowns.
I still got the Lions at home. Again, as much as I have been, the Rams are a playoff team from week 3. I think people have started overrating them. And I'm not saying they don't. Look, the one thing about this year's playoffs in the NFC, I only think 2 teams can't make the title game. I don't think Green Bay or Tampa Bay can make the title game. That doesn't mean they can't win the first round. I just don't see a path for them. I see a path for the Rams to easily make the title game. I see a path, of course, for San Francisco and, of course, for Dallas and, of course, for Detroit. So I do think that this is for Detroit, this kind of sucked. You finally get to the playoffs. You finally get a home game, and you get a team that is a 6th seed in only name. And I will say there are a little bit of comparisons to San Francisco 2 years ago, who record-wise didn't look great. They go into Dallas round 2, and you realize, though, wait a minute, this San Francisco team was only a 5 seed or a 6 seed. I think they were 6 seed too, weren't they?
Yeah, in 2021, it was Dallas and San Francisco in the wild card, 3 versus 6.
Yeah, it was 6. That's what I thought. Okay, so again, same thing where you realize that 49er team wasn't a real 6 seed. They were way better. They had just been beat up all year, had a couple losses, and then, as you said, got hot late and just kept on winning. So that's a valid point about the Rams. I still like Detroit in this game. All right, let's go to Philadelphia at Tampa Bay. Wild card round Monday. These teams played on Monday Night Football in week 3. The Eagles won 25-11. Of course, the Eagles got the 5 seed basically because they've collapsed. I mean, this was the Eagles' division 6 weeks ago. Even after Dallas beat them, we all felt like, well, that was nice. But, yeah, the Eagles are going to get the division again. Here we go. They have collapsed.
Here we go.
Here we go. Hang on. Oh, not that one.
Buck, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Anyway, are the Eagles free fall so deep that they lose to Tampa Bay?
This is the biggest toss-up to me. I really don't know. They're injured. They've lost 5 of 6. You think they're just in a free fall and they're just going to keep losing and be one and done. But something tells me they're going to figure out how to win. And it'll be an ugly game. I think it'll be a low-scoring, ugly game, but I think in like 17-15.
I don't know if it's that they figure out anything. I just don't think Tampa Bay's that good. Look, Baker Mayfield's story is great. I mean, and I know there's people in our sports rehab that simply because he played at OU, they absolutely hate him. I don't hate the guy. I think that he can be cocky, but I think you have to be that to be successful in a sport like football. But I still think it's a great story. I mean, you look at where he goes from Cleveland to Carolina to the Rams. He's literally people are like, oh, that Tampa's only having him as a starter because A, they don't have anybody else, and B, this is a great way to rebuild. And they turn around and make the playoffs. But I also think that if they're in any other division in the NFC, they're a 7-10 team at best.
Yeah, they took advantage of the situation. Going into the season, you and I thought, well, really you thought the best quarterback in that division would win the division. You were right. We thought it would be Derek Carr. It ended up being Baker Mayfield. Overall, he's had a pretty good year. He didn't have to be a stud. Getting to play Carolina twice and play Chicago early when they were still trying to figure things out kind of pads on to those wins. And then having an all-time great receiver like Mike Evans to just chunk it down, kind of correct some of your mistakes.
Yeah.
And you have a Chris Godwin can get you a bunch of catches over the middle. They have solid play on. They have talent on offense. It's still Baker, but
yeah, I mean, you could make the case that with a better quarterback, they're a way better team because they have. I mean, Rashid White has came in and just been a godsend for the run game. I mean, they play a lot like they did last year or 2 years ago. It's just with Baker Mayfield. I get that the Eagles are struggling, but again, in the last 2 weeks, the Buccaneers scored 9 against the terrible Panther team, and then scored 13 against the Saints. But 10 of that was all trash. Saints were up 23-3 at one point. Speaking of Derek Carr, he did the most Derek Carr thing he does. Struggles when you need him, and then finishes the season as the hottest quarterback, where everybody's like, man, if the Saints could have just gotten to the playoffs, man, that right there. Everybody can talk about a Tony Romo or a Dak Prescott, but Derek Carr is the poster child of he always finishes the season strong enough that where people think, man, if he just plays good in 2 more games, because I didn't want to play the Saints as a Dallas fan. I did not want to play the Saints because Derek Carr can come out and before you know it, throw for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. But anyway, so you think the Eagles win this game and you think it's ugly. I think the Eagles win. I kind of feel like the Eagles, I think it's ugly, but I just think the Eagles are a better team. I just think the Eagles are like a 2-touchdown better team than Tampa Bay.
I don't even care how injured A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are. I don't care how bad their defense has been playing. I still think they find a way to gut out a win. And
yeah.
I'm not sure what it's going to look like. It might be more running. I'm not sure if Swift is healthy, but it might be on Jalen Hurts' on shoulders to win the game. And I think he's good enough to win this game by himself.
I know a lot of people are saying that there's a lot of turmoil, but I don't feel that. Like A.J. Brown after the game, and maybe he was doing it for show, but him, staying in the locker room and greeting every player and coach as they came in. You don't do that if you're pissed off and you're ready to go. You don't even fake that. Like that takes. I was actually impressed by that. I like A.J. Brown. Again, we talk about it. I don't like the Eagles as an organization, but I tend to always like their players. They're just.
I would love these players on the Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
Darius Slay. A.J. Brown for sure, just big and powerful and dominating. He can take over a game. DeAndre Swift is quick. I mean, they're almost in their entire offensive line.
Yep. And so I don't think they're good enough to get past the second round. I think it depends on matchups. But I do think that they'll beat Tampa. And I kind of feel like I think they'll beat Tampa good enough to where you'll see next week a lot of are the Eagles back? Are the Eagles back? But I don't think they will be because I do think they'll be playing the Dallas Cowboys. Let's go ahead and finish it off. The Sunday afternoon game, Green Bay, the 7 seed versus Dallas, the 2 seed, 3:30 p.m. This has all the great things that make this game as great. You've got Mike McCarthy versus his former team. You've got the Green Bay Dallas playoff history that in your mind, it feels like it's way more than 9 or 8 games. This is the 9th game in the history because it seems like outside of the 82 win, and people forget about that one, outside of the 82 win, it always feels like when Dallas and the Packers meet up, something big happens. whether it be the Ice Bowl, whether it be the Don Meredith basically quit because he was stressed out about playing as a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, or it's the 90s Cowboys and you saw the growth of them, but you also saw in that 95 championship game the growth of that Packers team, and you realize, holy crap, the Packers are going to be really, really good going forward. And then, of course, the no catch, Aaron Rodgers walk-off. Every game feels like it's just been an absolutely just impactful game in NFL history. I don't feel that way with this game. I'm nervous just because I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and hey, last 30 years. But I kind of feel like Dallas is going to do what Dallas has done against teams on this level, and I kind of feel like it'll be close early. Might be a little nervous. I think Jordan Love will have a few drives because that's just what Dallas defense does. But I think at the end of the day, Dallas wins like 31-14. I think we're smiling and relaxing in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. With the Packers, I think they'll start well early just because Aaron Jones is healthy and they have a couple of good rookie receivers this year to complement their second-year receivers, Dobbs and Watson.
Yeah, but Watson's hurt again. I don't even know if he's playing.
But Dontavius Wicks is coming on, and then Jaden Reed is becoming a stud. I'm going to be drafting him next season. He is real, real good. So having said that, Love is finding himself, winning record, first year as a starter full-time. I think it's going to be a competitive first half, and then I think the Dallas Cowboys will be dialing it up on defense in the second half, creating some turnovers, kind of forcing the Packers to abandon any kind of running game and just try to just sling it around. Which
that's the key right there. There is a path where if the Cowboy offense is struggling and not keeping the pressure on, there's a path where Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon just run and run and run. Because that's what's going to beat Dallas. If Dallas gets beat in the playoffs this year, I don't think it's going to be by a quarterback throwing for 345 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's going to be 180 yards rushing, and it's going to be time of possession. And so if you're Dallas, you've got to jump out early and stay ahead of them to force them into having to pass, because I think you can still force Love into mistakes. Also, you got to worry about that Green Bay pass rush. It disappears, but we saw, like in Thanksgiving, what they did to Jared Goff, and we all know the issues that Dallas has had offensively. Now, La'el Collins has been re-signed as depth. I kind of feel like you might see him if Terrence still struggles. I don't think they will have any issue putting Collins in immediately.
And the Cowboys didn't start their guards, Tyler Smith and Zach Martin, the season finale, and they needed to win that game and win the division. So the health of our starting guards in total, that's going to be a factor in this game. Packers were able to get pressure on the Lions on Thanksgiving, and Lions have one of the top 5 offensive lines in football. So Rashawn Gary and company can definitely get to the quarterback. They just got to see how good our offensive line holds up. But I still think it'll be a pretty close first half. I'll get a bunch of text messages from you complaining about Dallas doing it again.
Let Quinn go. Fire Quinn.
Yeah.
Just let him go. Screw it.
Yeah, but I think the second half, the Cowboys will pull away. I think it'll be just a little bit less scoring, maybe 27-19 Cowboys.
Can I give you, though, a path that I would love to see in an alternative world?
Okay.
Dan Quinn. Well, first off, let's assume let's say the Cowboys, finally win the Super Bowl, which would then completely clinch greatest sports year ever for me, which it already is. We had that question a couple weeks ago. You were talking about it. And we're finally going to redo our fandom show. We've done like twice, and both times we've gotten so drunk we just end up on completely different paths. But this is the greatest sports year in my life. But because of everything that's happened, again, not only the Rangers, but you had the Stars make the Western Conference Final. You had the Longhorns make the college playoff. I've never had this many teams have this success. But just think about this. So Dan Quinn moves on. And Jerry's wanting to swing for the fences, and he brings in 3-4 Wink Martindale. You've got Hankins as your nose guard. DeMarcus Lawrence is one end in a 3-4. Micah Parsons as the outside backer, off the ball, off the ground. I mean, does he not become TJ Watt? Does he not? I mean, that's the if you want Micah Parsons to break the sack record, it's never going to be from the defensive end position.
Yeah.
It's got to be from and that's kind of tantalizing to me. Small linebackers, you need to get a bigger linebacker up front in the middle because you got to, when you have a 3-4, you don't have that protection. But man, I could see Dallas flipping to a 3-4 and being really, really good with this lineup.
What happens with Marquise Bell?
I think that they really actually want him to become a safety. This was never, he was never supposed to be, linebacker. And you saw, like, against almost said the Redskins. Well, I guess me saying almost said the Redskins means I just said the Redskins. But he struggled. He's the one that gave up the touchdown early on that 4th down. He got beat really bad. Brian Robinson just basically put the foot in the ground and Bell went the wrong way. You started seeing him kind of get ground down by bigger backs. So I don't think they want him to be a linebacker, or he's your other linebacker on the other side of a 3-4 outside.
That's what I was thinking. They're going to have him as more of a hybrid. It depends on what scheme, right? But either they might ask him to gain 5 or 10 pounds and be 6'3", 215 instead of 6'3", 205.
Yeah.
Or they move him to safety. I don't know. I know he has a place with the Cowboys. I think he's not afraid to make a play or to mess up. You need those guys and just coach them. Just get good coaching in there, and he's going to turn into a stud. I think people will know more about Marquise Bell in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so what's your score prediction on this one?
27-19 Cowboys.
Oh, wow, you said that quick. You've been thinking about it. I'm saying 31-14 Cowboys. I think it's like 14-14 at half.
Yep.
I'm calling it now. Turpin will have a return for a touchdown, and that's going to be what breaks it open.
Okay.
Because the Packers, they're not as bad as the Rams on special teams, but they've given up some big returns this year.
Anders Carlson has not had a good year in his rookie year for the Packers. You think with his brother, Daniel Carlson, doing so well with the Raiders, that Anders would be just as good, and he is not that good.
But isn't it? I mean, let him kick where he's indoor for 8 games. I mean, I think a lot of it's where they're having to kick. More and more, I say that, but look at Greg Zuerlein. He can't kick in a dome, and he goes out to the Jets, and he's dropping 62-yarders in the snow like it. God, I love Greg the Leg, but damn, he failed us so bad.
He's your Jameis Winston, but for kickers.
Yeah, I mean, only here, though.
Or Jameis Winston, not Jameson. Yeah, only here, yeah.
All right. That is going to do it for this episode. Of course, we'll be back next week for the divisional round in the playoffs. I think the playoffs are going to wipe the bad taste of the NFL season. Not that, I mean, it's football, and we've loved it, but it's been ugly this year. All the quarterback injuries, just all the scheming to protect big plays. I think these playoffs with the matchups, but I also think this playoffs, no matter who wins it, you're going to start seeing teams go, wait a minute. Teams are playing shell. Teams have smaller linebackers. Let's run the ball more. Because if whoever wins the Super Bowl this year is going to do it with a run game. I don't see any path to win this Super Bowl with a run game only getting 40 or 50 yards. You're going to have to get 100 yards each game in these playoffs, in my opinion.
Well, the Super Bowl favorites both run the ball well. The Ravens run the ball well. The 49ers run the ball well. So could very well be the case.
All right. He's intern Noe. I'm Terry. This has been Outdrank the Coverage. Brought to you by Grandeur Pest Solutions right here on L4 Media.